Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. In this video, we will compare how is it like to work for a bigger company compared to working for a smaller company. We will go into the details like how is the salary package, how is the working environment, how are in general the perks other than your package, and how is it in general we can compare these two specifically in Germany. So I myself have worked both in bigger companies and smaller companies. So I'm able to share my personal experience with you, that how I find it to work for a smaller company compared to a bigger company. And not just my personal experience, I've also reached out to some of my friends who are working in the smaller companies and also some of my friends who are working in the bigger companies. So I would be able to give you the information or the experience from not just from myself, but also from a couple of other people as well. So let's start. So let's start with this salary package. So when I started at a smaller company, so it depends if it's a startup or if it's kind of a mid-sized company. So sometimes in a startup, they usually offer a higher package because they have a smaller team and they would like to keep those people for a longer time. But my company was a mid-sized company, and also some of the friends that who work in the smaller companies, they're also kind of a mid-sized company, not just a startup. So in there, usually they offer you higher number. When I say higher number, they could be somewhere between 55,000 to 65,000. So you would be starting with a number like this, even if you don't have an experience. So I started without any experience in my very first job, and I was offered a package which was somewhat between this range. But the problem is, in the smaller companies, it's really hard that you could get a raise in a smaller amount of time, which means you would be working with the same package for maybe up to 3 years with the same package if you don't negotiate your package after a year, after maybe 2 years. So it's always nice that you go to your manager and you try to negotiate, because it's very unlikely that they already have a automatic system that could give you a raise based on the inflation or some other incentives. So which means if you're working for a smaller company, when you start with a number, you are most likely to be earning that similar amount for the next 2 to 3 years. So make sure when you start your first job or any job in a smaller company, you try to negotiate in your job interview so that you could start with a good number. Now, comparatively, in the bigger companies, you can start in a similar range, maybe somewhat between 55,000 to 65,000, but you get a lot of on top perks. For example, they will also be offering you a holiday bonus, your performance bonus, maybe somewhat for your transport or your fuel. Maybe they could offer you a car. So even if you're earning somewhat between 55,000 to 65,000, you get up to maybe between 5,000 to 10,000 worth of these extra perks. The most common perks are your holiday bonus, which is around 1,000 euro to 1,500 euros. That is a one-time. You get 13 salary, which is usually called a Christmas bonus, which is usually you get an extra salary in the month of December or November, which means you get your annual or you're paid instead of 12 months, you are paid like for 13 months. So this is very common in the bigger companies. And on top of that, for example, my company, they also give us free shares. So once a year, we get a specific amount of shares for free. And then on top of that, we are also allowed to buy some more shares. So if you ask me, I have worked in both industries or in both in both smaller and bigger companies. I prefer the bigger companies because they want to keep you, and they would like to take care of you in a way that it's kind of a long term. So the way it works in the bigger company is it's more useful for them if you stay at the company for the longer time. Which means if you are loyal to a company, by loyal I mean if you're staying in the company for a long term, they would value you more, and they would try to keep you happy, so they always offer these extra things. But that does not mean you don't have to put enough hours there. You would work way harder in the bigger company compared to a smaller company because you would have more responsibilities here. But this is not the same for all the companies. So I'm also talking based on my experience and my friend's experience. So from responsibilities, let's talk about your work environment and how is working for a smaller company compared to a bigger company. In the smaller company, you have the opportunity that you see the project to be able to see it, to be able to observe it, to be able to learn from it, and to be able to work on it from A to Z. In my experience, when I was working for a smaller company, I was involved in the project from the very beginning, which means as soon as we get a project from a client, I was involved in the design process, and then I was also involved when we were actually implementing the design, and then I was also involved when we were doing the project management of it until the project actually reaches the customer. So you are able, or you have this opportunity to see the entire project building and developing, growing right in front of you. It gives you a lot of exposure, it gives you a lot of experience. So which is why people usually say if it's your first job, try to work for a startup, or maybe try to work for a smaller company where you have to work hard, you have to put in more hours, but you will have the opportunity to learn from this, which I completely agree. I have learned a lot from my very first job. I was involved in many projects which gave me a lot of exposure to different kind of customers, different kinds of project and everything. But if you compare this in a bigger company, in the bigger company you will be a piece of the puzzle, and let's say the puzzle is like a 2,000 piece puzzle and you are just one part of it. So sometimes it is possible that you will not be able to see the entire picture, but the entire picture is not complete without you, without that small piece or that one piece of the puzzle, right? So you would still be important for the bigger picture or for the entire company, but your exposure to the work, your exposure to what's happening around you might be smaller. You might not be able to see who the customer is. You might not be able to see how many processes has this already been through until it actually reached you. And maybe like even after you, it still has to go through so many people, so many departments until it actually reaches back the customer or wherever the final destination is. So sometimes it's a little bit hard to see the bigger picture, and sometimes it's a bit frustrating. But it also has its silver lining, which is you don't have to worry about the bigger picture. You don't have to worry if the client is happy or not. You are only responsible to do your part of the puzzle, only your part of the job. So that also sometimes it's much easier, or well, it really depends on the situation, but I think it's less, it might be less stressful. Now the third part, which is your exposure to different kind of people, or let's say networking. In the smaller company, you might not get the opportunity to do this networking with different kinds of people in different departments, or maybe with different companies. But in the bigger company, you would automatically be exposed with many people For example, I have been, right now I'm working for a multinational company, and I have been working for this company for a year and a half now. And I have already been exposed to so many people, so many amazing people that have inspired me. And I know, or at least I see myself where I would be in the next 10 to 15 years if I stay at the same company. So it gives you a long-term picture to picture yourself where you could see yourself in the coming years. So in terms of networking, I would prefer the bigger company. So now let's talk about work-life balance, which is very, very important. When I was working for a smaller company, I never brought the work home. Everything, like I go to office, I do my job there, and once I leave the office, I barely thought about it. But for some of my friends, because they were working for a smaller company and because that was their first job, they had to learn a lot of things. So when they used to go home, they used to maybe study a little bit about their job, which is good because you're learning. But they were a little bit stressed because of the fact that they had to learn a lot because they had more responsibility. They didn't have a lot of people at the office to whom they could go and ask for help. So it made them work very, very hard in the first year. Comparatively, when you work for a bigger company, I do bring work home, but that is only because when I have an important presentation tomorrow and maybe this presentation is in front of a lot of people. So I want to be prepared because I know that I will be exposed to a lot of people. I know that I will get the opportunity to impress a lot of people. So sometimes I do bring work home, but that is only in the specific cases. And whenever, if there is a problem, there's a bigger problem that we are working to solve it. So sometimes it's all over my head. So it also frustrates you sometimes. So I think there are pros and cons in both smaller company and bigger company when it comes to this. But one thing that I really like about your work-life balance in the bigger company is when I was working for the smaller company, when you work overtime, you could use those hours to take like one day off. And I remember you don't get paid for those extra hours, but you were allowed to maybe leave a little bit early the next day, and if you're working over hours the first day. But they usually do not recommend that. But in the bigger company, at least the company that I work for, there the policy is I'm allowed to take 4 days off every quarter. So every 3 months, I'm allowed to take 4 days off, which will come off this over hours. So it happens quite often that if I go to office a little bit early, I easily work maybe an hour more. When I'm working from home, I easily work an hour extra from home. So I easily gather up these extra hours, which I usually use to take some long weekends. I usually take the Friday off or maybe Monday off. So that is always helpful that you could use these extra hours to take the day off. But the company of one of my friends, which is also a bigger company, they're not allowed to take off anytime they want. They're only allowed to take off for these extra hours on a bridge day. For example, there is a public holiday on Thursday, then they are able to use this extra hours on a Friday to make it a long weekend. So it really depends what is the policy of the company is. But usually they are more flexible in the bigger companies. So this is something that I really like. So we talked about both. So what is the verdict? So if you ask me, I have thought about it a lot. So if you ask me, I would say, if it's your very first job, do not shy away from working for a smaller company. It will give you a lot of exposure and experience, but negotiate on a better salary. Try to start with a good salary because it's a little bit hard in the smaller companies to get a frequent raise. So if you're someone who has just finished their studies, if you have an opportunity to work for a smaller company, go for it. Now, if you already have some experience and if you have the opportunity to choose between smaller company with, let's say, 5 to 10,000 more in the package compared to working for a bigger company where you're earning like 5 to 10,000 less than the offer you have for the smaller company, I would recommend go for the bigger company, because there you will have annual raises. At least I get a raise every year. You would have the holiday bonus, which I also have. You will get maybe the Christmas bonus, which I also have, and many other perks. So if you already have an experience and if you have to make a choice between these two, I would recommend go for the bigger company. It will help you to progress more because you will make a lot of contacts, a lot of networking. So it's always helpful for also to develop a good personality, because especially people like us who work in the technology, who are engineers, we are very good with the machines and the computers that sometimes we miss the communication part. And in the bigger company, I get to do the presentation, I get to lead the meetings quite often, that it really helps my leadership skills as well. So if I were you, I would choose the bigger company if you already have some experience. At least that's what I did. So this was my experience. Do let me know in the comments what do you think about it and what is your experience. Maybe I can make a part 2 and I can add your experience, or maybe I can just bring you to my video and then we can speak about it all together. But until then, you can leave a comment. But if you have any questions, you can always write me on my socials or here in the comments. So maybe I'll see you in the next video with a different topic, maybe studying, scholarships, or work life, or in general life in Germany. So see you in the next video. Until then, have a good time.